I'm gonna take a walk today. Never really explored here before. It's next to a swamp. I have some of that green chert in my little napping bag here. And I think I'm gonna hike around in here and find a good spot to set up a tarp and to try to make one of my knives. Around here, about 10,000 years ago, there was Paleo Indians hunting here and gathering. They used stone tools, and the tools they used here were a couple different cherts. The prominent one found here is a green chert. It's a very glossy green, and that's from New York State. Then there's a few others. There's something called felsite, and that's not such a good material, but imagine 13,000 years ago when you needed to eat, you used what you could get. As far as I know, there was only one. It's called a fluted point, or Clovis point, but they don't really call it Clovis up here. There was only one broken point found here at a temporary hunt camp near the main river, and I haven't gotten a chance to look at that point yet, but the size of the fluted points around here are generally this big, and I attribute that to quality of the material, because there's a lot of cracks in it and flaws, as well as you're traveling a lot and you're sharpening it down as your tools break. If you're using them for hardcore activity like hunting caribou, which is what they did here, if you're throwing a spear and you miss and you hit a tree, it's gonna at least dull the point a little bit. So you're gonna want to sharpen it up after a missed throw, or if you hit it and you hit bone. If you hit bone, you're more likely to break something. The majority of what was found in Connecticut was green chert from New York State, and the points are about this big, maybe a little bigger. Somebody in Massachusetts found one that was pretty big. So I have some of that green chert in my little napping bag here, and I think I'm gonna hike around in here and find a good spot to set up a tarp and to try to make one of my knives. I have to find some kind of clearing or something. It's pretty brambly. Let's see if you could see over here. Back there is one of New England's rock walls. And the theory is that farmers here, when they were colonizing, put in these rock walls to separate their livestock. But they're kind of everywhere and they stretch for miles, so I don't know. Okay, let's go walk up to that shit. Interesting things in the woods here. You come across some strange stuff sometimes. I think I might set up near the rock walls up over there. So we're at a little bit of a crossroads on the path here. There's a big hill up there, and the rock wall goes right up the hill. Yeah, this spot feels pretty good. I think I'll sit up here, maybe right in the path. The reason I'm putting this tarp down right there is because I don't want any of my flakes of stone to get scattered here. I want to take it with me on the way out to make sure that nobody accidentally finds this and thinks it's an archaeological site. We definitely don't want that. I am in school to try to become an archaeologist. I have a long road ahead of me, though. I have a lot of experience in archaeology. Been doing this for a long time, maybe 12 years. Some of it volunteer archaeology, some of it paid archaeology. A lot of consulting work, working for a museum, and a battlefield project. as well as some cultural resource management. It's rock, but this is rock from New York. You can see it's not too great. And I spalled these off a much longer, bigger rock. Now the reason I knocked them into this shape is because it's big enough to be a knife. It's the size of my hand. And it's easier to transport. Now, I brought a few of them with me because the way I shape these tools doing my flint knapping is a high risk of failure on these, especially with this material. It's not the best material possible. You'd have to dig down pretty deep to get good stuff, and this is not that deep. So it has all kinds of weathering. You can see some here that you have to knock away. But most people won't knap stuff like this unless it's completely smooth and glassy. Most people will not even attempt it. And this is all I work. This is all I've been working for 10 years now. Rough material, sturdy material, rough material, hard to work material. And I've learned a lesson recently. Wear some kind of glasses. I got a flake stuck right in my eye, and luckily it didn't injure me. I just pulled it out, and no injury, but it went right into my tear duct. So I figured from now on I should probably wear eye protection. And I should probably wear gloves too, but I can't get the same control of the rock. When I'm barehanded, I have way more control of where the flakes go compared to when I wear a glove. When I wear a glove, it doesn't turn out so good. But anyway, I'm going to show you the basics of how I do this. So normally, the way ancient people did this was they used a heavy rock and an antler. Now, I like to use what's called, I don't like the term, I don't like using it, but they call it abo tools. I call it traditional tools. I knap with traditional tools. But since I'm hurt so bad, I'm going to take a little bit of a shortcut and use copper. Now I'll show you what that looks like. This is for the delicate work, and this one's for the heavy duty work. And it's pretty heavy. And that'll work. That's enough to make my knives. So I'm just going to show you what it looks like to make these. This is just me doing my thing. We'll get started now. So what I'm doing is when I hit this there, it will peel off part of the rock. Now this is razor sharp. This alone can butcher an entire deer, as is. And that came right off of there. See where those two smack marks are? Now the other thing I do is I take a coarse stone and I grind the edges to make it easier to peel those flakes off. Now this is just a super quick knife demonstration of how to make it. We're getting down to the accurate size of the knife. Now this will be good for fishing. This size is perfect because it doesn't put too much pressure in the middle when you're using it. Anything bigger, the bigger you get, the more chance of breaking it has. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to shape this now. And this is the size of my favorite knife, the knife I go fishing with all the time, and the knife I go hunting with. It might actually be a little smaller than that. It's easy to carry, it's super sharp, it's just as sharp as the big ones, it's just as sturdy as the big ones. And I'll be doing a larger one in another video, but this one is just to show you how these are made and what they are capable of, and that's in other videos. But right now we're just kind of hanging out and doing some flint knapping in the woods. The stuff I have left is not of the best quality, and you can see that brown right there is actually weathering inside the rock, which causes a weak point, which caused it to snap right here. Would have been a little bit bigger, about that big. But we'll work with this. Alright, so we got the basic knife shape going. As you can see, it's still not the best material, but we'll make do with what we have. And I'll finish this up, and we'll start the process of putting it on a handle. Alright, basic shaping, I'm going to call that done. I'm going to sharpen it up with a hand pad and a little piece of copper. Very, very sharp. If you look carefully, you can see all the little impurities in there and crystals. And that really interferes with working on things and making them how you want them to be. But this is good. This is good for what we're going for out here. And this is about the size of the tools they used 13,000, 10,000 years ago. Now, I'll show you what's left over from that big piece of rock. All that right there. All those flakes, and that's why we put the tarp down. To catch all of it and to bring it home with us. I'll clean this up, and we'll cut a branch for a handle. And we'll get working on that. Now all of our flakes are nice and tight inside the tarp. I'll throw it in my bag and we could get going. Alright, and I'll just show you, just so you can see. No disturbance, no flakes on the ground. Didn't leave anything behind. That's the way it should be if you're doing this. Alright, so what I'm going to do... Man, I'm beat from doing that. I'm going to walk around and look for a good handle for that little knife. Now, the people that follow me that want to use these tools, the way to resharpen them, not that you ever should really have to resharpen them, you take a tip of antler or a tip of copper and you put it inside a wooden handle. You drill a hole and you put the copper or the antler in there and you glue it in real good. And when I'll show this in another video, but when you're sharpening it, you push the antler or copper straight into the rock and then pop down. Don't know if that makes any sense, but I'll show you in another video. This tree actually looks good. It's falling down, so I'll take off the top where it's more dead. I'm gonna make the handle slightly thicker, just so I have more material to work with. Alright. It's thick, but it'll do. Bug landed on the screen. This edge right here. We use this tool to take the bark off. I'm just going to do this fast. I want to take a sharp edge and keep cutting. One way, one way, one way, the other way, one way, and as you can see, very slowly it makes cuts. So we'll do that for a bit, and I'll get back to you when I get a groove cut in this thing. Hopefully it's not dark by then. Alright. Could go a little bit deeper, but for now, that's how I'm going to do it. Handle's a little bit too long too, but super, super sharp. Looks good to me. So what I'm going to do now is I have to find something to make my glue with. I brought sinew with me. I'll try to find a puddle somewhere to soak it in. I'm sure there's a puddle somewhere in a swamp, right? It's gotta be somewhere. About the charcoal that I need for the glue. I don't know what to do about that, but I have an idea. The knife is just about finished. And this would be perfect for a fish knife. Just need a shorter handle. What I mean by a fish knife, on the Wooded Beardsman's channel, as well as One Wild Crafter, they used a small green chert knife about that size and an obsidian blade that I made that I shouldn't have sent them. I don't like obsidian, I just sent it because I had it. But I know better now. When I send those guys anything, it's gonna be this stuff. It's gonna be the good stuff. The stuff that stands up to abuse. The stuff that you could drop on a rock 10 times and it doesn't break. Obsidian breaks. But anyway, they used one of my knives to cut up fish. And I believe Jeremy, One Wild Crafter, actually filleted a fish with one of these. So, perfect size. We'll also skin a deer. Perfect size. And I'll give a demo of one this size in another video, but for now we're just making it. Having some fun out here in the woods. We'll find a place to make that pitch. Pretty happy with this. Can't wait to test it. Look at that. Look at those colors. It's really got some pretty colors in there. There we go. A long walk back to the car. I'm gonna head back to the car. I got something in there that I could use. But it's such a long way back. I really, I have to go get more of this material. I'm running out of good stuff. This one I left a little thick in the middle, which I don't usually do, but I didn't want to risk breaking it. If you look, there's a little bump here, and I left that there because of all this crud in there. See that line? If I tried to thin that from this angle, it probably would have broken in half, because that's an imperfection. But it used as is. It won't affect the quality of the knife any. It won't affect the performance of the knife. Usually projectile points thrown or shot from an arrow were thinner for more penetration, but that's not the purpose of these. These are cutting tools. They are cutting tools. On this knife, I want to shave this down a bit so that it's flush with that, so when I glue it, it transitions nicely. I'm carrying this big bag of tools. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a little bit of charcoal to make my secret glue. This glue makes it way sturdier, but I'm not giving the secret away. Alright, so now what I'm going to do first is try to trim this. This will pop right out. Put that in my pocket, and I'll be right back after that's trimmed. So I shaped this more. I smoothed it out. I got more of the bark off. But I'm running low on battery here, so I think we got to speed it up a little bit. So what I'll do is I'll put the glue in there, and I'll let it sit for a minute, and then we'll figure out what to do with the sinew. Just put that right in there. Take the point. I want to make sure it's in there good, but you got to be careful here that you don't cut yourself while putting it in. So it's in, and now we got to smooth out that glue. We'll let this dry, and we'll figure out what to do with the sinew. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to take our sinew. This is off of a white-tailed deer. And what we're going to do is we're going to hit this with the moose antler against a rock to be able to get peels of sinew off of here. Now the trick of that is finding a rock. Here's a rock. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to continue to let the knife dry. I'm going to take the sinew and just pound it. I'll speed this up. Takes a while. Okay, so now you can see it separates. And that's what we're going to use as our cordage. So while the knife is drying, we're going to go back to that puddle and we're going to put the sinew in it and let it sit, and then we're going to wrap the knife. And the knife is just about done. It'll be able to be used tomorrow once everything sets and dries. And if you want, I'll make another video on using this. But let me know. Let me know if you want me to do that. I'm sure you do. I'm sure you do, because it's cool as shit using a rock as a knife. Just something you find out in the wild and you put it to use. If you know what you're doing, you could do this. You could do this with glass, some ceramic, like a ceramic tile floor. That could be a knife. It'll get dull fast, but it works. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is just let this sit in the water for a minute. You only need a short amount of time. Peel off a piece like that, and just throw it in the water. and let it sit there for a moment. Make sure it goes under. And you don't really need too much of this, but if you want it to look really cool and primitive, use a bunch. So now it's wet, and I'm just going to take it and wrap it around like that. And you're going to want to do that a few times so that you have, when this dries, it shrinks and it grabs the rock, and it'll adhere to all of this and pull it all together really nicely, and it'll be really sturdy. You'll be able to use it. So I'll show you what it looks like when it's finished. Alright, got it mostly wrapped up now. Do a little bit more support around the base. And as this dries, like I said, it'll stick to itself and shrink and grab it. Got one more to go, one more to put on, and we're done with this knife till it dries. This stuff you don't want on there, it's junk. Just pick that off as best as you can. Okay. And we now have, as soon as it dries, a very, very effective, usable chert stone knife. Very effective. And I will be demonstrating just how effective these are. These knives. Which is very, very effective. People use this for hundreds of thousands of years. Pre-humans, humans. Even us right now, I use them. I'll let that dry, and I'll let you see what it looks like when it's dry. See you in a bit. There's cool colors in there. So, this is what I made out in the woods. And this is my knife that I use for everything. Little tiny dude. Compare the sizes of the two. This one's a little bigger. But this is what I use when I'm fishing. I skinned a squirrel with this. And still razor sharp. Perfect little tools. So I'm out here at the shoreline today. I brought my napping kit, and I brought some chunks of flint, well, rhyolite and flint, and I'm gonna show you today how to make a stone knife out of a spall for use, to use. I always bring multiple pieces. In this case I brought 3. I have some more out in the car because when I nap I hit so hard I sometimes break them. So when you're looking for a stone to make a knife, you want something that doesn't have too many flaws in it. What I mean by flaws is crystal pockets, little cracks in the rock. You can see there's a few here. Just those lines going through the rock. And those aren't very good, but I could knock that off. And the rest of this looks okay. there's one big one going through here, but we'll see how that goes. There's a few cracks. There's one here. There's one going through there. As compared to this rock, which you don't see any of those. There's like one right there. See this little damaged spot? That's gonna break out. But this one looks good, and this one looks excellent. There's not too many flaws in this at all. So the smoother the appearance, if there's no cracks running through, that's what you're looking for, something like this. So I put a tarp down below me here to catch the flakes, because you don't want to leave any flakes behind for people to step on or for somebody to confuse it for an archaeological site. So anything that comes off this rock you're going to want to take out with you. Don't leave it behind. For this I'm going to use a copper billet. It's pretty heavy. And if you wanted to use traditional tools, you would use an antler, which is, you know, it's similar. This isn't as dense as this, so this works a little bit better. I've used this so much that it flattened that end of the antler, and I have to re-round it. So for today we'll use this. So what I'm doing here with this, it's a grinding wheel, but I'm using it to grind the edges of the rock smooth so that they don't crush when you're trying to make the flakes go. When you're hitting a spot, you want the flake to travel. You don't want it to just crumble into dust. So when you're grinding the edges, you're making them stronger. And when you make them stronger, they don't crush when you hit them. I'll demonstrate that in a minute. So, usually you don't start at the bottom of the rock. I'm going to say this is the bottom, this is the top. But usually you don't start at the bottom, but there's a good ridge here. If you look along here, you'll see that it runs straight up the entire rock. So I'm going to try to knock a flake off. It'll probably go to about right here in a circular cone. And I'm going to put down leather on my knee so that I don't hurt myself or cut myself. But I'm going to hit right at that spot where this ridge ends. At the bottom here is the lowest point, so that's where you want to hit. You want to hit at the lowest point. So this rock here was sent to me by a friend who found some in creeks, and this is different than what I'm used to working to. It's a little more brittle, so I'm not sure how this one's going to go, but he's no longer with us, and I wanted to try to make something nice out of the rock he sent me. So I'm going to try this. I don't know how it's going to go because I'm not used to this material at all. I don't know how hard I have to hit. I don't know how soft I have to hit. I don't know if it's going to break. So I got to hit a little harder. It's a little crumbly in there. See what we could do. So what I'm doing here is I'm trying to make where I'm going to hit the lowest point on the other side. So when you flip it over, there's a low point, and that's where you want to hit to drive the flake. But in order to get that, you want to hit on the opposite side. And I'll show you what I mean in a minute. That's an arrowhead. Now this part was damaged here. It's all grainy in there. It was a little bit freeze cracked, so it just broke right off. But it's okay, we could work with that. Now when I hit this one, it broke, but the entire flake came off from there, and it thinned it down. up until this point here where it hinged out. Now another reason for keeping your flakes and bringing them home with you is because every one of those flakes you could make into a tool, you could make into an arrowhead, you could make into a spear point. You don't want to waste rock. I see another crack going through here, so I'm going to try to just knock this piece off. And what I'm going to do is just zigzag this, so I'm going to hit the lowest points on the opposite side. So the lowest point is here. I'm going to hit into there and just grind it just a little bit. Now that would have went clear across the piece, but there's damage in here that stopped it. So we're going to want to get rid of this piece too. I see a line going through here. So we'll see what we could do. It's all crumbly in here, but we could work with that. Just have to work around the pieces that are damaged in these creek rocks. But even if it snaps off right here, which it might, that's still big enough for a knife that you could use. So same thing, I'm just going to go through the process of thinning this down, hitting into the rock like that, not just straight down, but at an angle where you're trying to shoot the flake into the rock. So not off, but in. So you want to tilt your rock accordingly, depending on where you want the flake to go. That's a nice little knife. This rock is a little bit crumbly, but that's okay. Now it's forming that zigzag, and you could see here that it's getting sharp. So we'll just keep thinning it and sharpening it. Now, I'll explain again. You want to make this side lower, so you knock off the opposite side. And then you could grind it a little bit, just to make it able to catch a flake, is how I say. But I'm going to show this one in my hand. I'm going to hold my finger underneath to see if I could make the flake to travel across my fingers. Now we have one there, one big one there, another one there. And this side is still untouched. So I like to work one side at a time, so that I'll just continue doing this. So what I mean by low points is the lowest point on the rock, and I'm going to show you exactly. You wouldn't want to hit here, because if you hit here, it's just going to crumble and not go anywhere. But if you hit here, it'll travel along that line and take off a flake. Then for this one, you could see here, if you flip it over, there's a line there. So that'll make the flake run. And I'm going to hit right there. Now it might crumble, but we'll try it anyway. And I'm hitting down and in. So I'm putting pressure in. I'm not just smacking straight down. I'm hitting in. You can see where I'm tapping. And that took off that whole section there. Now, the platform is right in the middle. So you don't want to do anything there. Now, you're going to look for another low point, like there. So now I'll do the same thing and hit right there. That hinged out because of damage in there, but that's okay. I'm good at working around that. So if you see a spot that you think you might be able to take a flake, if you flip it over this way, you can't take a flake from there. Because when you flip it this way, this is the high point. So, but if you flip it this way, that's the low point. So, now that it's the low point, take a flake off. And you just keep zigzagging like that. You find the low spots, or a spot that you think you could take a flake, and if you're holding it this way, and you see a spot here that looks like you want to take a flake, that's the highest point. That's above the center line of the rock. So you're not going to want to hit there, but you're going to flip it over, and now it's the low point. So you could hit there. So now that I have the basic shape, and I'm still experimenting with the rock, and I don't know how it's going to hold together, but I showed you the basics of setting up the platform and where to hit. So I'm going to kind of speed through this a little bit now, and just get it down to a basic knife shape, and then show you the next step of what to do. So I knocked this down into a biface, which means flakes on both sides. Bifacial, it has two faces. And how I did that was just how I showed you before. I kept hitting those low spots. Like that, over and over again, until it thins it down. And you get your basic knife shape. So I'm going to show the next stage of making this into a knife. You could already use it as is, you just have to sharpen up the areas you grind it off. So to sharpen them, you would just use an antler and push down. I'll show that in a minute. But this is just about done for me. I don't mind the base being a little thick because that leaves me more room to resharpen as I need to, if I need to. It doesn't have to be a super thin, super parallel flaked all the way across the whole piece to be effective for use. It looked just like that. This is how artifacts look. Random flaking, still sharp as can be. Alright, so I'm just going to speed through sharpening this and getting it notched and ready to be hafted onto a stick for a knife handle. But the same exact thing I did before with the bopper, you're going to do with a flaker. This is a piece of copper and a dowel. Now the way I do it is I put it under my leg, like that. I find the lowest point, and I push the rock into the flaker, and then I hit the flaker with an antler. And that'll pop flakes off. And you're gonna do that all the way down the piece. And you're still thinning it, but you're also sharpening it. Here's a good one. Blue all the way to the middle. So on this piece, I'm still putting the flaker on the lowest place, and I'm hitting down to knock the flake off. And I'm going to do that on every low point, and then I'm going to flip it over and do the same thing on every low point. Alright, so I sharpened this up. This side's pretty thin, this is going to be the cutting edge. This side's a little thicker, so I'm going to leave that to resharpen as I need to. I thinned down the base, and I made places to haft it to tie into the stick. So I'm going to notch out little spots for the sinew to go when you're wrapping around. And that's really easy to do. A lot of people have a problem with it, but you got to support the whole piece. So support it as much as you can, like that. look where you want to notch, and the same thing, hit straight in and down. And then you're going to flip it over and do the same thing. And flip it over again, same thing. And then you're forming a groove to tie in. Now I want that to go just a little bit deeper. Now you want it to have a place to catch, so it can't go down or up. And that's important because you don't want your knife blade to slip out of the handle. But if you have it tied in there good with a deep enough groove, then it won't slip. So what I'm going to do now, instead of using the indirect, I'm going to put it on my knee. I'm going to take the flaker, put it under my arm, and push straight in and down to make it just a little bit deeper. So this, in this form, holding it against your forearm like that, is called an Ishi stick. And there's books on that you could look into. I-S-H-I stick. But what you're going to do is push in and down. And that formed the groove that I need to catch. So I'll do that on the other side too. This side's a little thick, so I'm going to try to thin that down just a tiny bit with the last method that I was using. Under the knee. Okay, so now we'll just speed through that, do the same thing here. So I'm just going to carve out a little spot here for the string to sit on that ledge. Okay. So there's some more work I have to do here, but this will cut. This side I need to do a little more work as well. But that's just about finished for the blade, for the knife blade. And these I use them on everything. They work really well. Sometimes I just put them right in my pocket. I'll show you. Make a little tiny pocket knife. And this is really super sharp. On this rock, you can see it's very shiny and glittery inside, and that's quartz crystals. And this area here, you can thin this more. I don't like to, just because it gives more support when you're using the knife. It doesn't break, like if it's too thin, it'll break there. It'll break right where you tie it. If you're pushing a lot of pressure, or if you're really overusing it, or if you drop it, it'll break right here, because that's a weak spot going straight across. So if you leave that spot a little thicker for your knives, it'll be safer. Safer for the knife, safer for you. So did you get that just now? The seagull dropped a shell to break it open on that rock, and then he quickly ate it and flew off. Now I used my Ishi stick. I took a little flake there, a little flake there, a little flake there. It made a little serrated edge, and I sharpened it to a tip by doing the same thing. All I did was put it in the leather in my hand and knock flakes off that way. I have a little problem spot there, but I'll fix that up. And then you have a very, very sharp tip. Wherever you're going to tie it, wherever it's touching any other piece of wood or sinew or anything you use in the tie, you're going to want to gently grind it so that it's not sharp. Grind in the notches so that it's not sharp, so it doesn't cut through the sinew. When you're using the tool, you don't want it to cut through whatever you're using to tie the stone tool to the handle. If it cuts through the wrapping, it's no good. So this is a New York chert sent to me by my friend who passed away a couple months ago. And I wanted to make a nice knife out of his rock. He asked me to, but he never got to see me make one. So I made one. Here you go, buddy. This is some pretty tough stuff. It hinges a lot. It's not too great of a material, but they did use this. It's very, very sharp. And we'll get this on a handle. I grinded the bottom a little. I thinned it just a tiny bit so that I could slide the stick on here. And we're almost finished with the knife. Alright, so I finished the blade. I'm going to clean all this up. I'm going to roll it up and bring it out with me. And then I'm going to go find something suitable for a handle. And I brought sinew with me. And I have some pine pitch with me that I'm going to use as glue. So we'll get working on that now. So I'm just going to look around for a suitable handle of a branch that fell or something hanging off, or maybe some driftwood or something. Maybe I'll find something laying around that I could use, and we'll take a look now. So I looked all around here, and I don't want to cut any of the trees for a handle here. And I looked around on the ground. Everything's way too dry, too brittle to snap. So I'm going to go maybe look for some driftwood or something. Just something along maybe with the side of the road as I'm driving. And I got everything I need to tie it to the handle once I find the handle. And I wasn't going to look out there, but it's all flooded. So I'm going to head that way. Into the woods rather than on the coast because I couldn't find a dead tree anywhere. This one's pretty dead. So I'm going to cut this for a handle right here. Just need to file down the edges a little bit here. It's almost deep enough. That's deep enough. Just need to grind this a little bit. Maybe saw a little deeper. And then we'll be good to add the glue and the sinew. And you'll have your knife. So I'm just scratching up the edges here just a little bit for the sinew to catch on. And then it should be good to go. A little bit deeper. So I have sinew here. And you're just going to peel that into a strand. Pull off the extra junk. Separate it a few times. and add it into water. I'm just gonna let it sit in the water a little bit while you're messing around with the other things. You want to make sure it's entirely under the water. You're gonna want enough to really wrap that blade in. So maybe 3 or 4 strands. I'm gonna do a little extra just to be safe. All right. So we'll let the sinew soak. While that's soaking, in my last video I collected some pine pitch, pine sap, and I'm gonna use that in my glue. So what we're gonna do for that is we're gonna heat it up and melt it a little bit. Okay, so once it's dripping like that, add it into the notch. Not too much. All right. Watch your fingers that it doesn't drip on your fingers, because it'll burn you, like it just did on me. So you're gonna want to make charcoal, just enough to mix with that glue. And that piece looks good. So what you do is you knock the piece off, and you grind it up. Got the piece here, I need a flatter rock. You don't really need too much. You mix that in. It smells really good. You pat that all down, all the way. Alright, so now we're going to take the blade and we're going to put it right into that slot. We have to make it fit right. You want it to be really snug. Like that. Okay, then you're going to push the sap up against it. Be careful, it might still be hot. It's hot. Then you're gonna let that dry. It shouldn't take too long to dry. So now that this is a little more dry, and as that hardens, it'll get drier and drier. But we're gonna wrap it with the sinew now. I just have to dump out this water. Now we have all the wet sinew right here. You're gonna do one strand at a time. As quickly as you can, because the sinew kind of dries fast. But I'm wrapping it in a crisscross manner to secure it to the stick. And here, I make a little bit of support around the blade area. What this does is when the sinew dries, it shrinks and it grabs really tight. And it'll make a really secure bond here. And it just takes time to dry. It'll also stick to itself. So if you lay the sinew on top of the sinew at the bottom here, it'll stick as it shrinks. You want to smooth out the sinew as much as you can and make sure it's not hung up anywhere. Adjustments, pull it tight. And then when that dries up, you have a knife that you could use. You're gonna want to give it time to dry. But once that sinew turns brown instead of white, that's when you'll know it's done and it's finished drying. Just want to be really meticulous with smoothing everything out, making sure it's tight, making sure it's laying right. And once you got it how you want it, you just set it to the side and you let it dry. And you have your primitive stone knife ready for use. So we're gonna let this dry for about an hour. Geese. And we'll show you what it looks like when it's all dried up and finished. It'll take a little bit. We cut a groove in the branch. We cut the branch at about a fist's length, a little longer. And a little longer is for the hafting, so that you have a place to hold where the blade meets the wood. So it's a little longer than your hand length. And you cut a V-notch into the wood, straight in, at a V. And you make sure the stone fits into the handle. And it's got to fit pretty snug. Otherwise it'll wobble all over the place. But once you got a snug fit, you add the pine pitch glue, you wrap it with the wet sinew, and then you just let it dry for about an hour, maybe more. And once that's finished, you should be able to use your knife. I did this with a modern saw, but you could do it with stone tools, or you could do it with a bandsaw or whatever you have. Just something to cut, something to shape it. Easily you could have done this with a stone saw. Would have taken a little bit longer, but it would have worked. And the stone we napped on the beach, on the shoreline, and we napped it with just a copper billet. It's a pretty rough stone, but it worked pretty good. It's really sharp. Really sharp. And that we did fairly quick as well. We completed a knife. And we will show you how well it works when it's completely dry and finished. And this, again, was river cobble, pulled out of a river. Hopefully you like this primitive stone knife. Made fairly quickly on this one. Thanks for joining in, guys. And like, comment, subscribe. Hit that little bell icon. Make sure that you see the uploads once per week or every other week, depending. But you'll get more stuff like this, more how-tos, more demonstrations, more adventures, more fun. And make sure you come and hang out. Thanks. Now, what I'm going to do today is going to be a smaller blade for utility work. So first thing you're going to want to do is protect yourself. Put some leather on your leg. Take a bopper, could be antler or copper. Hit right here, see if I can get a fairly large flake off. So I'm going to do this quick as I can without breaking it. Switch to a smaller bopper. And like I said, we're going to make this one fairly small, so I'm going to take off about this much. Keep the blade small. If you're new to napping, don't try to go this fast. Take your time and know your angles, set them up right, take the flakes off. Make that smaller. Smaller meaning thinner and shorter. Let's switch to a smaller one. Smaller. So as I go along, I'm just making it smaller and smaller. We want it small enough to fit in that handle. So it's a tiny handle. I'm going to want it small enough and comfortable enough to use for utility work, whether that be small game, fish, or even just opening packages. We don't want it too long either, because with a smaller handle, if it's too long and you're applying pressure, it might break right here. Just working the edge. All right. It's going faster. So this is more of the size I was thinking. Just straighten up the edges a little bit. Okay, so I think I'm going to stop with the percussion here. What I'm going to do is grind all the edges all the way around. Give myself areas to pressure flake on here. Now we're going to see how well that fits in. Pretty good, but it has to go a little bit thinner in the base. Now, copper on that end, caribou antler on that end. So what I'm doing is pressure flaking on the opposite side. I'm creating these little serrations right at my fingertip there. You can do that all the way down your cutting edge. Indirect, just for one spot here. Okay. Go back to pressure flaking. Now, something like this you don't want too thin with obsidian, because if you try to use obsidian when it's too thin, it'll snap. It's basically glass. You can get splinters working obsidian. And one thing you could do with this is you could make a neck knife, which I tend to not do with obsidian because it's so sharp. But when you heft it in like that, you could drill a little hole through here, put it on a necklace, and wear it around your neck. But you're going to want a sheath for this to cover it, to make sure you don't get cut. I'm just going a little slow here for the camera, but all I'm doing is sharpening up the edges, making it really, really sharp. next thing I'm gonna do on this is put a notches, probably right in here. And I'm gonna do it at an angle because I find that the corner notches are stronger than the notches that go straight in. I'm just gonna do that real quick. I don't want these to go too deep either, because like I said, if you're working with obsidian, it'll break at weak spots. So it'll break right there. So you don't want to make it, you don't want to make those too deep. Just enough to get a secure tie-in. All right. One more spot here. All right. So just a real quick corner notch from obsidian. Now what we're going to do is we're just going to add a glue in here. Make sure this fits. Fits pretty good. Tie it. And let it dry. Now you could use any kind of glue in here to make that secure. And I like to wrap it with sinew. I'm going to grind this edge down just a little to keep it flush. But you wrap with sinew, make sure it's wrapped on the bone, on the antler, on the wood, whatever. And make sure it's really glued in there. And I'll show you what this can do as soon as it's dried up and how well these work. Okay, so it's not completely dry yet. But I'm going to use a bait fish and just clean them a little bit. If the glue is dry enough. I'll just do it gentle because it's not dry yet. And I'm not going to show the guts, but you just pull the guts out now. And then you could use him as catfish bait, because I'm not going to eat him. But yeah, that works. You could say clean cut. Clean cut. And that's a little utility knife for you. Cut me too, look at that. So one of the things I've found is that stone knives cut a little different than your modern knife. It's razor sharp, but what you want to do is you want to poke in first with the tip. So you poke in, then you cut. With this, it's easy enough to just cut like that, but if you're trying to get a clean cut down this way, you could go in this way, poke in, and then zip, or go in this way and zip. Hope you guys liked this video. We made this little highly portable, highly effective obsidian stone knife. Be back soon with new videos, guys. Like and subscribe. Hit that bell icon so you get notified. And I will see you soon. Thanks, guys.